This recording is protected by copyright. No part may be reproduced without the prior permission of the University of South Australia.
Good evening. Before we begin tonight's proceedings, may I please introduce you to Jack Buckskin. Jack is a proud Kaurna Narungga Wurrungal man who spent his life learning and teaching the Kaurna language and culture locally, nationally and internationally. And Jack tonight will welcome you to Kaurna country. Jack.
Ngā Marni, how are we all? Yeah, we got a few responses. I used to ask that many years ago and nobody knew what I was talking about. So Ngā Marni means, are you all good? And we're going to cheat. You're going to say Marni I. Marni I means I'm good. Ngā Marni? Now we're all fluent. For those that don't know me, my name is Jack. I'm a proud Kaurna Narungga and Wurrungal man, represent 3 different Aboriginal groups of South Australia. We are connected to one in Victoria, but we don't mention Victorians. We still don't like them. I actually got tattooed across my chest, Kick a Vic. These are my children. It's true, I do. These are my children. Young Vincent here and young Jackson. My Aboriginal name's Ganya Pundu Unduwit Pinakudnuwitcha. Breaks up into 3 smaller names. Jack is much easier for people to remember though. So you can be like Destiny's Child and say my name if you like. Full of dad jokes. Just naturally happens when you have children, I think. So this is Nguku, he's the barking owl. So my name changed from just Ganya, which means the totem, it's my totem, which means the rock, to an extension of Nguku Itpina, the father of Nguku, or the barking owl. And this is Pundundu, the dragonfly, so my name is now Ganya Pundundu Itpina, the father of the dragonfly. It keeps changing to every child that we have. My eldest is in the back, she didn't want to come out. So I'm still getting used to my own name, but I remember when my mum asked me, when I asked my mum, I said, why the rock? She said, you look a lot like this guy called Dwayne. I don't see it yet, I'm more like a pebble, I think. But to welcome us on the country, I'm honoured to be invited here to be able to do this today as we gather in different spaces across Aboriginal lands and today on Kaurna country. The Adelaide City area is known as Darndaganya, which is the dreaming place of the big red kangaroo. Darnda was the one that gave us our law on the protocols and processes and our rights and rituals and customs on how to live on this country. He's the male red kangaroo. So we pay respects to the ancestors that go before us, from Darnda to the recent ancestors that go after us, and then leading away to the future generations. I welcome and pay respects to other Aboriginal people that are gathering here today as well. Not sure there'll be too many here. We're like scared of heights. We like to plant our feet firmly on the earth. So, you know, we watch those kind of movies, and these kind of movies with Star Trek and stuff, a lot of it is, we see a lot of marry-over with Aboriginal culture, you know, from, you know, things like transportation and things like that. Our people do that within a spirit form. It's our spirit that transports from place to place, and it's really funny when you grow up a skeptical kid and then your ancestors and your elders that are standing alongside you are going, there's people standing right in front of you that know exactly where you've been and what you're going to do. So I'm honoured to be involved in this and be invited here today. The closest thing that I've got to getting anywhere near space is I've actually got the longest. They should bring back Guinness World Book of Records, I think, only because then I can get in there, because I have the longest flight of a returning boomerang in human history. Wait for it. Because I gave it to a guy who gave it to an astronaut who took it up to the space station. It's still sitting there at the moment, so it's still a stick until it comes back. But once it makes it back, I'll hold on to that title forever. So anyway, thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the night today. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack, and thank you all for joining us here on this very special evening. I'm David Lloyd. I'm the Vice Chancellor and President of the University of South Australia, Australia's University of Enterprise. It all makes sense now, right? Well, this evening is being brought to you by a lot of people who did a lot of hard work, and particularly the very hard work of Executive Director Jacinta Thompson and her team at the Bob Hawke Prime Ministerial Centre. Jacinta, well done. Now, before we begin in earnest, can I please ask you to turn off your phones? Please. I'll wait, right? Because you're about to be transported to where none have gone before. And the insistent ring of a telephone does ruin that experience for everyone else. So, phasers on stun, please, communicators on silent. Fellow trekkers. I can do it with both hands. This is not an evening about Star Trek, although the positive vision of an optimistic and inclusive future is one that should warm the hearts of everyone here this evening in this room, even those who aren't wearing pointed ears in homage. And as an aside, cosmetic elf ears are a huge thing now in US youth culture, but you do have to travel to Los Angeles for surgery, and it's not reversible, just so you know. Not that I've Googled it. Tonight you are about to meet and hear from our guest of honour, George Takei. And whereas his story has some science fiction in it, that's only because it was sci-fi that made him an icon. What he did with that fame, that trajectory, is far, far more important. This is a man who, even though born in the United States of America, spent his formative years falsely imprisoned in a Japanese-American internment camp during World War II. His book, They Called Us Enemy, which is available here tonight, is George's first-hand account of those years behind barbed wire, behind the joys and the terrors of growing up under legalised racism, his mother's hard choices, his father's faith in democracy, and the way those experiences planted the seeds for his astonishing future. In his book, he poses life-defining questions. What does it mean to be American? Who gets to decide? And when the world is against you, what can one person do? At the war's end, George's family had nothing. No bank accounts, no home, no family business. Home became Skid Row in Los Angeles, a place where people on the edge of society lived then and still do. But Skid Row and places like it is where advocacy for poverty and homelessness is born. It's no surprise now that George is now one of the world's most powerful voices on these issues, from politics to pop culture, and is passionate in the fight for social justice. His extraordinary career in the entertainment industry notwithstanding, George has also served as a spokesperson for the Human Rights Campaign's Coming Out project and was Cultural Affairs Chairman of the Japanese American Citizens League. He's also Chairman Emeritus and a trustee of the Japanese American National Museum. George was appointed to the Japan-US Friendship Commission by former President Bill Clinton, and the government of Japan awarded Takei the Order of the Rising Sun, gold rays with rosette, for his contribution to US-Japanese relations. When George has concluded tonight's presentation, as a long-time devotee of a certain popular TV show, I do have a few questions for him as well. But until then, please join me in warmly welcoming Captain Hikaru Sulu. I do mean, of course, the actor George Takei, author, activist, and who is soon to be awarded, tomorrow, an honorary doctorate from the University of South Australia for his enormous contributions to the community and to the world. George?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And to Vice Chancellor David Lloyd for that introduction that covers the galaxy. Thank you very much. May you live long and prosper. It's such a joy for me to be back in Australia. And I must say, I owe so much of my visits to Australia to those dedicated Star Trek fans who are such great entrepreneurs and organizers. I got a telephone call way back in the 70s from Australia, the fan club, Star Trek fan club, inviting me to a convention in Sydney. I thought these people were mad. A convention in Sydney, Australia. Are they not aware of the great distance between Los Angeles across the Pacific to the farthest point, to Australia, and how costly that is? I really thought these people are not going to pull it off, but they are amazing. The combination of Australians and Star Trek fans, it works miracles. Because the ticket came, it was paid for, they told us it was all organized. I was amazed by the entrepreneurial spirit and the robust organizing that they did. I was very impressed. And I said, these Australians are something else. The convention was an enormous success. I joined the committee in the after-convention, post-convention celebration at a pub. And yes, you're great drinkers too. And I told them that I didn't think this was going to come off, but you guys can work things off like a bandit. You are true to your convict heritage. They said, no, no, no. All of the convicts were English. We're Australian. They know their identity. And it made me think, yes, and I have an identity too. But I'm blessed with two identities. Part of my heritage is from Japan. My grandparents boldly went where no other Japanese had gone before, to a country called America. They knew nothing of the culture, the language, but they were venturesome people. And they came to San Francisco, both my maternal and paternal grandparents. My maternal grandparents went to the capital city of California, Sacramento, and in the hinterlands is farming land. My maternal grandparents were farmers, and they began farming. They were quite successful. They had a son and daughter, and then my mother was born. So I have Japanese heritage from my grandparents' side. My father was born in Japan, but when he was a young boy, he lost his mother. He was 5 years old, and my widower grandfather didn't know what to do with himself. So he decided to start life anew in this faraway land called America. And he brought his two boys. My father was the younger of the two. He was 10 years old. And they sailed for America to San Francisco. My grandfather was an urbanist, and he stayed in San Francisco. And my father was raised and educated, went to college in San Francisco. So my father spoke English and Japanese both fluently. That's my heritage, part of my heritage, my Japanese heritage. My grandparents brought with them three of the important values that they possessed. One was called shimbo, which means resilience. The second value was gaman, which means endure the unendurable with dignity. Number three was gambaru, which means perseverance. Those three are part of my heritage. But I am born in America. I'm an American. And I treasure my American heritage. One of the greatest presidents that we had, Abraham Lincoln, said, "Our nation was conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. He said, our government is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. The values are rule of law, equal justice, and due process. Those are noble values. I cherish them. They are shining ideals. But I, as a Japanese American, have also a keen and deep knowledge of how fragile those noble values are. It happened because of an event on December 7th, 1941. Japan bombed Pearl Harbor in the middle of the Pacific in a surprise attack. It was a devastating attack. Over 2,400 people were killed. 20 ships were sunk, 8 of them major battleships. Over 300 aircrafts were destroyed. It was a horrific bombing, and the terror of that bombing swept across the Pacific to the west coast of America, rolled across the continent to the Atlantic coast. The next morning, President Roosevelt declared war on Japan, and suddenly America started to look at Japanese Americans with suspicion and fear and outright hatred. Japanese Americans walking on the sidewalk were yelled at, spat at, called terrible racist names. Our homes, our cars, our businesses were graffitied. My father's car had 3 letters painted on it, J-A-P, Jap, that hateful, racist epithet. But it wasn't just the Yahoo racists that took that position. Our elected officials got swept up in that madness. Our city councils, our state legislature, and even the United States Congress rang with those same hateful words aimed at us. The government came down with a curfew on all Japanese Americans. We had to be home by 8 p.m. and stay home until 6 a.m. We were imprisoned in our homes at night. And the next morning, when my parents went to the bank to make a deposit or a withdrawal, they discovered that our bank accounts were frozen. Our money was no longer accessible to us. The government had taken our money. Some families lost their entire life savings to that freezing of our bank accounts. And then the President of the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, got swept up in that hysteria. On February 19, 1942, he signed Executive Order 9066, which ordered all Japanese Americans on the West Coast, approximately 120,000 of us, to be summarily rounded up and imprisoned with no charge, no trial, no due process. We were to be imprisoned in 10 barbed wire prison camps in some of the most desolate, God-forsaken places in America. The blistering hot desert of Arizona, the sweltering, humid swamps of Arkansas, the cold, windswept high plains of Wyoming, Idaho, Utah, Colorado, and 2 of the most desolate places in our country. Our family was a family of 5. My parents, I was 5 years old at the time. My brother Henry was a year younger, and we had a baby sister, Nancy, who was an infant in a cradle. We lived in a 2-bedroom house on Garnet Street in Los Angeles. Early one morning in May, my father came into the bedroom that I shared with my brother, dressed us hurriedly, and told us to wait in the living room while he and my mother did some last-minute packing in our bedroom. With nothing to do, Henry and I were standing by the front window, just gazing out at the neighborhood. Suddenly, we saw 2 soldiers marching up our driveway. They carried rifles with shiny bayonets on them. They stomped up the front porch and with their fists began banging on the front door. Henry and I were terrified. Daddy came out of the bedroom and answered the door. And literally at the point of a bayonet, we were ordered out of our own home. My father gave Henry and me a box tied with twine to carry. He hefted 2 heavy suitcases, and we followed him out onto the driveway and stood there waiting for our mother to come out. And when she came out, escorted by one of the soldiers, she had our baby sister in one arm, a huge duffel bag in the other, and tears were streaming down her cheeks. I will never forget the terror, the horror of that horrible morning. We were taken by a caravan of buses to a racetrack in the outskirts of Los Angeles, Santa Anita Racetrack. Unloaded, herded over to the stable area, and each family was assigned a horse stall, still pungent with the stink of raw horse manure. For my parents, taking their 3 children into that infested horse stall, the grounds skittering with insects, flies buzzing around, was a humiliating, degrading, painful event. But to Henry and me, it was exciting. We get to sleep where the horses sleep, just like the horses. For my parents, that added to their anguish. We were there for about 4 months while the actual camps were being built. And it was announced shortly that we would be traveling again, this time by train, to the camp. My parents didn't know where it was. But I asked Daddy, where are we going? He stopped to think for a while, and he said, we're going on a long vacation in the country. Henry and I were excited. A long vacation in the country, and we get a train ride to boot. This was going to be exciting. That journey turned out to be 3 days and 2 nights, 2/3 of the way across the country to the swamp of Arkansas. For 3 days, 2 days and 2 nights, it was this boring trip through the dry, dusty desert of American Southwest. But on the morning of the 3rd day, we started to see greenery, grass, then shrubs, and then we started to see black pools of water. They called it the bayou. And we saw huge trees rising up out of that water, and their roots emerged out of the water, twisted, turned, dipped in, dipped out, in and out, like a snake snaking in and out of the bayou. And by early afternoon, we slowed down and we saw barbed wire fences running parallel to the train. It turned out they had built the internment camp parallel to the railroad track. As we got into the camp area, there were hordes of Japanese faces, people standing and staring at this train arriving with more. And behind them, I saw rows and rows and rows of black tar paper barrack, all the way to the horizon. That was to be the place of our long vacation in the country. I started school there in a black tar paper barrack. And on the first morning, the teacher said that she was going to teach us the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag hanging in the front of the classroom, and that we would do that every morning before school begins. I could see the barbed wire fence in the sentry tower right outside my schoolhouse window as I recited the words, "With liberty and justice," to really understand the stinging irony in liberty and justice for. We were there at the camp is called Rohwer, Rohwer, for a year, and then the government changed its mind. They realized that all these people behind barbed wire fence that they had categorized as enemy alien, which was preposterous. We weren't the enemy, and we weren't aliens. We were born in America. That these enemy alien represented fresh blood. There was a wartime manpower shortage, and all these young people that they could have had, but had categorized as enemy alien and imprisoned in a barbed wire prison camp. Their dilemma was how to justify that drafting of enemy aliens out of a barbed wire prison camp. In the chaos and confusion of wartime, many incompetents became lodged in the bureaucracies of the military and the government. And it became clear that their solution to that dilemma, a loyalty questionnaire, was put together by these incompetents. The loyalty questionnaire that they demanded that we all respond to, it was people over the age of 17. 17-year-old young man or an 87-year-old immigrant lady, all had to respond to the loyalty questionnaire. They had embedded in that loyalty questionnaire, which was about 40 questions, most of them innocuous. What kind of job did you have? How long did you work at it? Where was that? But there were two key questions that they wanted to see yes answers to. Question 27 and question 28. Question 27 asked, are you willing to serve in the United States military on combat duty wherever ordered? For my parents, they had three very young children. My baby sister was a toddler. They were being asked essentially to leave their children in imprisonment and bear arms to defend the country that's holding their children hostage. It was outrageous. They answered it truthfully as honestly as they could, they answered no. Question 28 was even more outrageous. It was one sentence with two contradictory ideas. It asked, will you swear your loyalty to the United States of America and forswear your loyalty to the Emperor of Japan? We're Americans. We never even thought of the Emperor, much less swear loyalty to him. So if we answered no, we don't have a loyalty to the Emperor to forswear, that no applied to the first part of the very same sentence. Will you swear your loyalty to the United States? If you answered yes, meaning I do swear my loyalty to the United States, that yes carried over to the second part, which meant that you were confessing to a non-existent loyalty to the emperor. It was a no-win question. You lost with a yes, and you lost with a no. My parents answered that too, honestly. They answered no. And with those two no's to the critical loyalty questionnaire, they were now recategorized, not as enemy alien, but as, what was the term there? They were categorized as disloyal. Outrageous. It was the most insulting series of questions. And then to be categorized as disloyal for your honesty. And because they were now categorized as disloyal, we had to be moved again from that camp in the swamps of Arkansas to a camp in Northern California right by the Oregon border that was now rechristened as a segregation camp for disloyals. Again, we had to be transported from Arkansas all the way back to California and to the most militarized, bristly with military armament prison camp. Tule Lake was the name of that camp, and this camp had not one layer of barbed wire fence, but two more. 3 layers of barbed wire fences. The sentry towers held not just soldiers with rifles. They installed machine guns up in the towers, aimed directly at us. And to really compound the outrage, they had a half a dozen tanks patrolling the perimeter, the third barbed wire fence. Those tanks are vehicles of warfare that belonged on a battlefield, not rumbling around to intimidate and goad people that were already enraged. That was also the camp that became the most notorious of the 10 camps. So the largest. Most of the camps held anywhere from 6,000 to 11,000 people. Tule Lake held 18,000 people, outrageously and irrationally categorized as disloyal. This was the situation, but flashing back to when the loyalty questionnaire first came down, thousands of young Japanese Americans were so desperate to get out of camp, they hated being incarcerated, that they were ready to do anything just to get out. And they answered those 2 key questions with yeses. And they were drafted out of camp into military service. The women were put into the WACs, the Women's Army Corps. The men were put into a segregated, all Japanese American unit, the 442nd Regimental Combat Team. They were sent to the battlefields of Europe, and used like cannon fodder. They were sent out on the most dangerous missions. Some were stalemated for months on end. They were sent out in waves. The first wave would go out, and those men were fiercely determined to show their mettle. They went out and they fought with amazing courage, stunning heroism. The first wave went out and they fought and they were gunned down. Second wave went out and they were gunned down. And the third wave went out and fought with equal courage, one after the other. The 442nd sustained the highest combat casualty rate of the entire war. And when the war finally ended, the men of the 447, the surviving men, were greeted back on the White House lawn. The 442nd turned out to be the most decorated unit in the history of United States military history. President Harry Truman greeted them on the White House lawn and said to them, "You fought not only the enemy, but prejudice, and you won." The war was over. 2 horrific bombs were dropped on Japan. Those people that were incarcerated knew nothing about it. We got no news from the outside world. No newspapers, no radio, nothing. The war ended. My family went back to Los Angeles. Others went elsewhere. But we were impoverished. We had nothing. They had taken everything from us. The government gave us a one-way ticket to anywhere in the United States and $25 to start life anew. My parents decided to go back to Los Angeles, and our first home turned out to be on Skid Row with scary, smelly, ugly people staggering about. My father's first job was as a dishwasher in a Chinatown restaurant. Only other Asians would hire us. My father had served as block manager, essentially the representatives of the incarcerated Japanese Americans. And now that we were out of camp, the people still saw him, came to him for advice and guidance. And so my father opened an employment agency in the Japanese American section of downtown Los Angeles. And he helped people get resettled, helped them find homes and employment. But the payment that they got was pennies, and he didn't have the heart to collect his fee. And so my mother made him quit that, and he found a dry cleaning shop that was available at low cost. The previous owner had failed, and so he bought that, built up the business, and sold it at a profit. And then he bought a grocery store and did the same thing, built it up and sold it at a profit. And finally, when the Japanese American community was getting back on their feet, he switched to real estate and sold homes and businesses to fellow Japanese Americans, and our family got back on its feet. When I became a teenager, I was very curious about my childhood imprisonment. And after dinner, I had many conversations with my father. And I kept insisting. I read the civics books. They shouldn't have done that. We were innocent people. We had nothing to do with Pearl Harbor. How could they have done that? And my father taught me about American democracy, that it is a people's democracy. And the people have to keep those words meaningful, those noble ideals of our democracy. And when the people fail it, then other people suffer. And that's what happened in our case. And he urged all his children to actively engage in a participatory democracy. And I volunteered in many causes. Whenever there was a disaster, a flood, or earthquake, I volunteered at the Junior Red Cross, filling these boxes with medicine and bandage and other necessary things. And I became active in student government. I ran for student body president in middle school, and I was elected president. I served as student body president. In high school, I served as the president of the senior board. And one election season, my father took me with him to volunteer at a presidential campaign. Adlai Stevenson for president, campaign headquarters. Somebody recognized that name. He was a great governor of Illinois and an eloquent speaker. He would have made a great president, but alas, he did not win. But my father said, in an American election, you never give up. It was also the Japanese philosophy of gaman. Never give up. You keep on keeping on. And so I volunteered for a candidate running for the United States Senate, representing California. I volunteered for the candidate running for governor of California. All my efforts lost. And then finally, and I had supported the only African American to be a city councilman on our city council, Tom Bradley. And when he decided to run for mayor of Los Angeles, I volunteered, but I said to Mayor Bradley, "Are you sure you want me?" Because I'm bad luck with every candidate I support. And he said, "No, you're a hard worker, you're dedicated, and I want you. Can you be the chair of my Asian American committee?" And so I served as in that position, got a lot of support for Tom Bradley, and he won at long last. He was the first African American to become, in fact, the only African American to become the mayor of Los Angeles, and he was an enormously successful mayor. He served for 20 years, 5 terms, and when he won as mayor, he phoned me to tell me that he'd like some help from me. And I said, "Sure thing, Tom. I'm willing to help however you want." He said, "I'd like to have you serve as my representative to the Southern California Rapid Transit District, which ran the bus operation." But Tom Bradley said, "Los Angeles is going to need a major subway system. And my mandate to you is to get started on building the first subway system that radiates out from downtown." I accepted that, and I served for 11 years on the board. But it started conflicting with my career. I believe in public service, but not completely at the cost of my career. So I was trying to balance the two, but it became too difficult. But do visit Los Angeles and use the best, the newest subway system in Los Angeles. We're very proud of it. I began to be active in the political process. As my father had told me, it's a participatory democracy, and we have to participate. And ultimately, I became active on the national level as well. Under President Clinton, I served on his Japan-United States Commission and other various commissions. But in the 70s, a movement began in the Japanese-American community to get an apology and redress for that unjust incarceration during the war. And by that time, in the 70s, something undreamed of had happened. Japanese Americans were now in the halls of Congress as elected representatives. In the House of Representatives, the lower house, we had 3 Japanese Americans as representatives. And in the U.S. Senate, the upper house, there were 2 Japanese Americans serving as United States senators. Both were veterans of the 442nd, the most decorated unit to come out of the Second World War. One of them, Senator Dan Inoue, had a loose right sleeve. He lost his right arm on a bloody battlefield in northern Italy, and he became one of the longest serving senators in the United States Senate, 48 years, and he died in office. And a friend as well. We had fundraisers for him at our home. He was a great senator of the United States Senate, but it was also our friend that was serving there. With those representatives in Washington giving us that leadership, and we working on the grassroots level, we began a campaign to get an apology and redress for the incarceration. The Congress created a congressional commission to gather information on the imprisonment of innocent Japanese Americans. And in 1981, they held a series of hearings. And I was one of the 700 that participated in the hearings. And I would like to read the concluding section from my testimony at the congressional hearings. I have come to understand that as noble and as precious as our American ideals are, they can also be very fragile. Democracy can only be as good or as strong or as true as the people who make it so. It is my belief that America today is strong enough and confident enough to recognize a grievous failure. I believe that it is honest enough to acknowledge that damage was done. And I would like to think that it is honorable enough to provide proper restitution for the injury that was done. For in a larger sense, injury was done to those very ideals that we hold as fundamental to our American system. We, all of us as Americans, must strive to redeem those precepts that faltered years ago when I was a boy. And in that role as an American, I urge restitution for the incarceration of American citizens of Japanese ancestry, because that restitution would, at the same time, be a bold move to strengthen the integrity of America. This was a testimony I gave in 1981 to the Congressional Commission. In 1984, the commission produced their report. And they found that there were 3 issues that contributed to that incarceration. Number 1 was war hysteria. Number 2, racial prejudice. And number 3, the failure of political leadership. This report went to the White House. And in 1988, President Ronald Reagan officially, on behalf of the United States government, apologized for what he called a grievous mistake. And signed the Civil Liberties Act, which authorized a $20,000 token redress for all the Japanese Americans who were survivors in that year of 1988. That $20,000 was a token apology, which was profoundly significant to me. Alas, my father had passed 9 years earlier. He died without ever knowing that there would be that apology. And it would have been so meaningful for him to be able to know that there was an apology. But my mother said, Daddy always knew this day would come. I have lived through an important chapter of American history. I have a merging of my Japanese heritage brought over by my grandparents, and also the cherished heritage from my American government. It is a valuable and treasured, and I know well, fragile heritage that needs great care. My heritage is an amalgam of the 2 heritages, my Japanese heritage and my American heritage. But I stand before you as a proud American. Thank you all very much. Lead the way.
I often, in these situations, look at the Hawke Centre and the Hawke Centre values, which are about strengthening democracy, valuing diversity, and building the future. And I have to say that every time we have somebody who hits all of those 3 measures, it's a spine-tingling event. And I want to thank you on behalf of everybody who's here for what you said to us here, because you absolutely hit each of those in equal measure tonight. So please join me in thanking George. Thank you. George, there's a lot of talk about American democracy and it being under threat. How real do you think that is? Is American democracy under threat?
We go through cycles. The World War II period where innocent people were unjustifiably imprisoned was one of those. Just recently, we got rid of the worst president that the United States has ever had. But he refuses to go away. He's still there and making a lot of noise. But I am convinced that ultimately, perhaps within the next year, he will be in handcuffs and going to jail. No, I really believe that. And his followers are still there in the arena. And there will be this turmoil continuing for some time. But ultimately, I think the real democracy will come back to the United States. And we know the vicissitudes of politics. We know that there's the push and pull. But I intend to be actively engaged, and we are making progress. So it's 3 steps forward, maybe 2 steps back, but we are making progress.
Indeed we are. Now, George, you do it very well as an activist, but I have to ask, should actors be activists? What does it say about society that we have manifest advocacy in this fashion?
Actors, too, are American citizens. We have all the rights of citizenship. Some are reluctant to take a public position on an issue, and that's their right if they choose to do so. But I, knowing of the fragility of our democracy, I have the arrogance to think that I can help strengthen our democracy by participating and urging my friends and colleagues to be active participants. It's a precious thing we have, our democracy. And we know how vulnerable it can be. And we see it constantly, particularly during that president's tenure. He goes back home after he's no longer president, taking top secret documents, documents that contain information that could mean life or death of some people. That is an absolutely irresponsible, egocentric person. And we should get rid of him, but he's going to be around to make trouble. So we will have some news coming from the U.S. or Washington for quite some time.
Well, I think you've got 3 million followers on Twitter who will actually can be galvanized as well, right? As much as he tried to galvanize his own.
Good.
But from acting and activism, I think I would be doing the audience a disservice if I didn't go back a little bit in time to the parallel component of your life, the piece where public service was starting to impede, which is on you as an actor. And I want to go back to 1965 specifically, to 28-year-old George Takei, and you received a script for what was being pitched as a Wagon Train to the Stars TV show. So when you received the script, what went through your mind? What did you make of it?
Well, when I got the call for an interview with Gene Roddenberry, I recognized it immediately as a breakthrough opportunity if I got cast. His vision was really something rare and remarkable in Hollywood. He wanted to make, he felt that television was being wasted on brainless quiz shows and comedies and cops and robbers. At a time when the United States was roiling with issues, controversies, and threats. And he wanted to comment on those issues. We had the civil rights movement going, African Americans campaigning for their equality. We had the Vietnam War going, which was dividing the United States. Half the country pro-war and the other half pro-peace. And I was actively engaged in the pro-peace movement. I was involved in the civil rights movement. I did a civil rights musical. So I felt I was using my profession and my craft as a part of the political process as well. So that could be done. But your question was?
When you got the script.
Oh, when I got the script. I tend to ramble, forgive me.
I would have brought you back eventually.
My rambling takes me off to the fringes of the initial question. I knew that it was an offer to do the role in a pilot film. So there was still no guarantee. But I read the script, and he said he wanted to use metaphor because we couldn't talk about the civil rights movement or the peace movement directly on television. It's an advertising medium, and advertisers don't like to get controversial. So he said he was going to use those issues metaphorically and put it in the future. And the whole structure of the show would be the Starship Enterprise was a metaphor for Starship Earth. And the strength of this starship lay in its diversity. Africa, Europe, North America, Asia, all being equal partners, each contributing his or her own unique vantage point, talent, philosophy, and working in concert. The Starship Earth being metaphorically the Starship Enterprise. And so that diversity was visual. We didn't talk about it, but you saw a African woman as the communications officer. You saw me representing the Asian, and you heard the diversity. There was a Scottish accented engineer, but even in him there was diversity, because Jimmy Doon was the name of the actor. He was Canadian, born and raised in Vancouver. And he told me, I'm getting famous playing a Scotsman, but I'm really Irish. And I know that's simpatico with you.
We claim the Scots.
But Jimmy Doon, and this was a conversation we were having at a bar after work. He said, I've drunk enough of the libation of Scotland to play a Scotsman. And he qualified enormously. And so with a Scottish accent, you heard the diversity. We had a navigator who had a Russian accent at a time when we were at the coldest point in the Cold War. And with that Russian accent, Gene Roddenberry was suggesting that even the Cold War can be overcome. But now we have another problem with Russia and a very hot war going on in Ukraine. So I love that idea of Gene Roddenberry addressing the issues of the time back in the 60s by metaphorically telling those stories as science fiction. And to be able to see that diversity on board the ship. But personally, I also saw it as a breakthrough opportunity, because it meant that if a series sold, it would mean steady employment.
True.
Actors work only when we do the guest shots, but it's not continuous. So if it's sold as a series, it meant regular. I mean, you get up in the morning and you go to work regularly, week after week. And that was an attractive thing. The other thing was Asians are portrayed in the American medium, particularly on television, as tokens and stereotypical roles. The servant, or the comic buffoon, or the villain. And here was an opportunity to be portraying one of the leaders on board the Starship Enterprise. And so this was an opportunity for me to have a breakthrough in the kind of presence, the image that we projected. So I was excited about it, and I was hoping I'd get cast. And to Gene Roddenberry's good taste and intelligence, he cast me.
George, does your association with the character of Sulu, does it define you, or did you find it limited you in any way? Did you become Mr. Sulu more than you became George?
If you're doing a series week after week, That's how the audience sees you. And so you do get defined by the character that you're playing. And Jimmy Doohan constantly complained, this is after the series was canceled, that he has been stereotyped out of the business. He's now cast only as a Scottish space guy. And he said he can't get hired because he's identified too much with that character. And Walter Koenig, who played Chekhov, had that same complaint. I, rather than complain, like to create my own opportunities. And so I got my public affairs TV series, Expression East-West, or going to the theater. I'm a theater actor originally, and so I kept on working, and I didn't complain, and the less you complain, the more happy you are.
Of course, the baton has been passed now from you, George Takei, to John Cho, who picked up the sword ceremonially in J.J. Abrams' Kelvin timeline. How do you feel about seeing someone else play your character?
Well, it's an action-adventure show, and I am aware of the passage of time and the demographics, and I will never take my shirt off in front of the camera again. And I won't even demonstrate my fencing prowess. And I'd seen, we founded a theater company to give Asian American actors substantial opportunities to practice our craft. And John was with the company when he was still in his late teens. And I said, that guy's talented. He's good looking. He's going to make it. And he made it by wearing my shoes.
That's right. Indeed, he did. Can I ask, in the reboot, Sulu was in a gay relationship. He's married with his partner, and they have a daughter. How did you feel about that same-sex marriage nod? Did you find that, was that something the producers discussed with you, or was that just something that you found out when you went to see it in the theater?
As a matter of fact, it was John that called. That was I can't remember the number of the film. What number was that?
I think it was in number 3. Yeah.
3? No. I did the first 6.
Oh, I knew you did the first 6. Sorry, it was number 13. Yeah.
The what?
Number 13. If we put Next Generation as well. Yeah.
And he's a real Star Trek expert here. I only work there. He has studied, researched, and written papers on it. He is a scholar of Star Trek. John called and told me the writer and the producers are talking about making Sulu gay for this as a tribute to you because of my activism for LGBT equality. And what do you think of that? And I said, they're turning Sulu gay? I said, Gene Roddenberry created Sulu. He created all of the characters as straight characters when we went on television because you couldn't deal with the gay issue at that time. It was too sensitive. And I'm delighted that now they are talking about having gay characters. But this movie is going to be coming out on the 50th anniversary of Star Trek. And the tribute should really be paid to Gene Roddenberry. It was his vision, his leadership, his creation that made Star Trek what it was. And so the appropriate tribute on the 50th anniversary of Star Trek should be paid to Gene Roddenberry. And I said, if you're paying tribute to Gene, I take a great umbrage with his creation of a straight character and turning it into a gay character offensive. The tribute belongs to Gene. Mm-hmm. If we can now deal with the gay issue, they should be as creative as Gene was, be as original as Gene was, and create a new character who's gay and spent his entire life as with Starfleet as a gay person. And his being gay could have been a positive contribution to the workings of the Enterprise. That should be the way it goes. And then the writer called, and I had a long conversation with him, and who was it that called? And so I talked to the production people about that idea. Make this 50th anniversary movie a tribute to Gene Roddenberry, create original characters that are gay, and keep Sulu. I was a gay actor playing a straight Sulu, yeah, and keep it that way. When the movie came out, no, it was not to be. And what was all that hoo-ha about Sulu being gay? He comes back from a mission, and there's a young man with a child, and Sulu goes straight to the child and embraces her. The next shot is the two of them walking together, and Sulu's carrying the girl. The guy could have been a neighbor or a brother, or, you know, there was nothing to indicate. I mean, not even a hug or a kiss. Yeah. What was all that hoo-ha about? It was, I thought, very namby-pamby.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I do have to ask, who is your favorite captain from all of the series?
Well, Sulu's, he admired Kirk. He was his role model. He was Sulu's captain. And so the admiration that Sulu, the character, had for
the emphasis Kirk, is noted, George.
The character. You're a rascal.
I've got one job. You've used your platform as an actor. You've used the stardom you've gained from what was a series which embraced diversity and the other. You've used that so effectively over the years. Was using this platform a very conscious decision that you made? Was this decision to leverage what you built through your acting career into advocacy? Was that by design, or was it just by happy coincidence?
It was a continuation of what I had been doing before Star Trek. As a young actor, I was involved in the civil rights movement, African Americans' campaign for equality. I did a civil rights musical. I was a lone Asian in a college group of white and black people. I was involved in the peace movement. In Hollywood, we had a organization that was involved in the peace movement called the Entertainment Industry for Peace and Justice, EIPJ. And one of my colleagues with that organization was Jane Fonda. Donald Sutherland was also one of them, but we had writers, directors in that organization. And we staged a lot of peace rallies in the public parks or in civic parking lots, but they were mostly white and a sprinkling of African Americans and Latinos, and very few Asians. And Jane said to me, we're campaigning for peace in Southeast Asia with Asians. Why don't we see more Asians there? And I said, well, Asians have, with the Japanese American community, been victimized by being visible on political issues. And they are reluctant to take visible positions on controversial issues because we have been punished. And but I said there is support for the peace movement in the Asian American community. It depends on how the rallies are presented. In public parks, it's much too visible. They don't want to, we have a saying, the nail that sticks up is the one that gets hammered down. And because we look this way, we're that much more visible, and we are vulnerable to being hammered down. Asians are reluctant to be at a public political event where they're visible. So I said, if we had a rally in a comfortable, safe, indoor, and respectable environment, then I'm sure they'll come out. And Jane said, well, do you think you can do it? I said, yes, I think I can. Let me talk to some people. And we came up with the idea of doing it at a downtown first-class hotel, the Biltmore Hotel, and rent their big ballroom, and the Asians would feel comfortable in that setting. However, it takes capital to rent that space. And so I reported back to Jane and said, that's the problem we have. We need to raise the cash. She said, how much do you think it's going to cost? I shared a number with her, and she said, let me write you a check. And she wrote right then and there. She's that kind of committed individual.
Yeah.
And also, yes, yay, Jane Fonda.
George, we are beginning to run out of time. I could talk to you all night, but the audience don't have permission slips to stay out for that long. So I have two final questions for you this evening. The first is incredibly self-indulgent. Could you please give us an oh my?
Oh my. Isn't that something? It's a common phrase, and I've been saying it all the time throughout my life, but I made the mistake of saying that phrase on the air on the Howard Stern show. I don't know how many of you are listeners of this. He's quite an interesting guy, but also controversial. And he had me saying, oh my, on tape. And so whether I'm there or not, when someone says or does something outrageous, he just presses a button and my voice comes on. Oh my.
And then finally, George, what advice have you got for this audience here tonight on how best they can hope to live long and prosper?
What?
How best can this audience here tonight live long and prosper? What advice have you?
To live long and prosper. Well, for the live long part, just don't die. The prosper part depends on you and circumstances and how you bring about your prosperity. But frankly, I think so much of prosperity is up here. If you're happy and comfortable, that's the greatest prosperity one can have. You can be a billionaire and be stressed out and be in conflict all the time and always uncomfortable, unhappy. That's not prosperity. It's not just your bank account. It's how happy you are. And sometimes the best things in life are free. So keep on living and keep enjoying.
Thank you, George. George, thank you for giving us a fascinating insight into your life. And please, ladies and gentlemen, please join with me again in thanking George Takei.